Welcome to Zeitgeist. I'm Zuri, that's Alistair, and we need to talk about what just happened at the Pentagon.
Yeah, 4 executive orders in one day. This is a big deal.
So President Trump just signed what might be the most sweeping military policy changes we've seen in decades. We're talking about a ban on transgender service members, the elimination of all DEI programs across the armed forces, and reinstating troops who were discharged for refusing the COVID vaccine, with back pay.
Okay, let's take these one at a time. The transgender ban, how many people are we actually talking about here?
So this is interesting. Early estimates said around 15,000 transgender troops could be affected, but Pentagon data released in February showed the actual number is about 4,200, roughly 0.2% of the 2 million active duty personnel. The military tracks this through gender dysphoria diagnoses.
And what does the executive order actually say? Like, what's the administration's reasoning?
The order uses pretty strong language. It says the military had been, quote, afflicted with radical gender ideology and that expressing a gender identity different from your sex assigned at birth doesn't meet military standards. The administration argues 3 main things. First, that transgender individuals can't satisfy what they call the rigorous standards necessary for military service due to medical, surgical, and mental health needs. Second, that paying for gender-affirming care costs taxpayers millions. And third, that this conflicts with military values of discipline and uniformity.
How much has the military actually spent on this care?
Pentagon data shows $52 million since 2015, when transgender troops were first allowed to serve openly. That averages out to about $9,000 per service member. And here's a detail that often gets lost. Half of diagnosed service members required no medical care at all, and only about a quarter needed surgery.
Okay, so what do supporters of this policy say when you get past the official talking points?
The core argument from supporters is about military readiness and mission focus. They argue the military exists for one purpose, to fight and win wars, and that anything that complicates that mission should be scrutinized. They point to the real logistical challenges. Gender dysphoria can require ongoing medical care, hormone treatments, and in some cases, surgeries that could affect deployability. They argue that combat units need to be deployable anywhere, anytime, and that managing complex medical needs in a war zone is genuinely difficult.
That's a practical argument at least.
Right. And there's also a fairness argument some supporters make. They say the military already disqualifies people for all kinds of medical conditions: diabetes, asthma, certain mental health diagnoses. The question they ask is, why should gender dysphoria be treated differently than other conditions that require ongoing treatment? They see this as applying consistent medical standards, not targeting a specific group.
So, what do critics say to that?
Critics have pretty forceful responses. First, on the readiness argument, they point out that transgender service members have been serving openly since 2016, and there's no evidence they're less capable or deployable than anyone else. Many have deployed to combat zones and accommodations and met every standard asked of them. The argument is, if someone is meeting all their fitness requirements, passing all their evaluations, doing their job well, why does their gender identity matter?
And what about the cost argument?
Critics call this misleading at best. $52 million over 9 years sounds like a lot until you compare it to the military's overall healthcare budget, which is around $60 billion per year. We're talking about less than 1/100% of military healthcare spending. The military spends more on Viagra than on transgender care. So critics argue this is clearly not about fiscal responsibility.
What about the legal challenges?
Multiple rights groups sued immediately. The National Center for Lesbian Rights and GLAAD Law filed on behalf of 6 active service members and 2 people trying to enlist. They argued the ban violates the Fifth Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, essentially that you can't single out a group of otherwise qualified people based on identity. A federal judge initially blocked the ban, calling it likely unconstitutional, but in May, the Supreme Court allowed it to take effect while cases continue. The 3 liberal justices dissented publicly.
So what happens to people currently serving?
The Pentagon issued guidance requiring the identification and discharge of transgender troops within 60 days, with very limited exemptions. You can only stay if there's a, quote, compelling government interest in retaining you that directly supports warfighting capabilities. Shannon Minter from the National Centre for Lesbian Rights called this the nuclear option. It excludes people who are otherwise qualified and meeting every standard.
Let's talk about the other orders. The DEI one. What does that actually change?
This order eliminates all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and the Coast Guard. It bans what it calls race-based and sex-based preferences in military advancement. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has 90 days to submit a report detailing every DEI program currently operating.
What's the argument for this one?
Supporters say military advancement should be based purely on merit, your skills, your performance, your leadership. They argue DEI programs created a perception, whether accurate or not, that factors other than merit influence promotions and assignments. The concern is that if troops believe the system isn't fair, it undermines trust and cohesion. Trump framed it as returning to meritocracy.
And critics?
Critics argue these programs existed to address real historical barriers. The military was segregated until 1948. Women couldn't serve in combat roles until 2013. The argument is that without intentional efforts, unconscious biases can still affect who gets mentored, who gets the career-making assignments, who gets promoted. They see DEI not as replacing merit, but as making sure merit actually gets recognized across all groups.
Now, the COVID vaccine one, this affects way more people, right?
Yes. Between 2021 and 2023, the military discharged over 8,000 troops for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine. This order allows all of them to request reinstatement with their former rank and full-back pay restored.
That's a significant reversal.
It is. Supporters argue these service members made a principled stand. They had religious or personal objections to the vaccine, and losing their careers for that was unjust. Many had years of service, clean records, and were otherwise exemplary troops. The argument is that a vaccine mandate was government overreach, and these people deserve their lives back.
What do critics say?
Critics point out the military has always required vaccinations. It's not optional. You get shots for everything from anthrax to smallpox depending on where you're deployed. The concern is that allowing people to refuse vaccines sets a precedent that could affect readiness. If a disease outbreak happens in a war zone and troops can opt out of the vaccine, that's a real operational problem. There's also the question of fairness to those who did comply.
What's been the reaction from Congress?
Predictably split. Democratic Senator Andy Kim called the transgender ban, quote, an insult to the bravery and service of transgender service members, asking how the military can protect all Americans if it doesn't recognize all Americans. Republican lawmakers have largely supported the orders, framing them as restoring focus to the military's core mission.
Where does this leave us? 4,000 people potentially losing their jobs, 8,000 potentially getting them back.
It's a fundamental question about what the military should be. One side sees these changes as removing distractions and returning focus to combat readiness. The other side sees it as discrimination that kicks out qualified people and signals that some Americans aren't welcome to serve their country. The legal battles will continue, but for now, these orders are in effect.
A lot to process. We'll keep following this.
That's where it stands. Thanks for watching Zeitgeist.
If this helped you understand the issue, subscribe so you catch the next one. See you soon!